Good evening. We collectively acknowledge that Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwa, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Indian nations, for historic indigenous communities in Michigan, for indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Michigan State University more accountable to the needs of American Indian and indigenous peoples. Good evening. Welcome to Wheelbarrow Books presents Gabrielle Calvocoressi and Daniel Lassell. I'm Laurie Hollinger. I'm the acting director of the RCAH Center for Poetry. Before we get rolling, I'd like to thank the interim dean of the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities, Glenn Chambers, for his support of tonight's program. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to Madge Bice up there on the soundboard for her technical assistance tonight, and to Steve Byback, preparator of the Lookout Gallery, for preparing and opening the space for our events. Thank you as well to our stellar staff of student interns, Julius Pato, Maddie Stark, Dominic Stoops, and Joe Troxel, for their work in promoting, planning, and carrying out today's events. A warm thanks and welcome as well to Scott Harris of Everybody Reads for being on hand this evening, offering our guests books for sale. I hope you'll join us upstairs in the Lookout for a reception and book signing immediately following this reading. I hope, too, that you'll join us next week because the Festival of Listening is coming back on a week from tonight at Scene Metro Space. Some of you may or may not know, this is a poetry reading by volunteer readers, such as yourselves, who can read poetry in any language that isn't English. It's a celebration of the rhythm of language and musicality and just community. We're doing that in cooperation with the Arts, Learning, and Living community, just formed this year here at MSU. On April 3rd, we welcome poet Laura Apal to celebrate the release of her new book, Cauterized, from MSU Press. You'll find information on that reading and any other events on the table and back. Also, on that magical table, you will find some broadsides of Gabrielle Calvocoressi's poem Hammond B3 Organ Cistern, which were produced for their visit in 2019. We had some left over. Please feel free to take one on your way out. It's a great thing to get an autograph on and to fill up that spot on the wall where you took that old picture down. So Wheelbarrow Books started as a long-standing dream of the one and only Anita Skeen, founder of the RCAH Center for Poetry. As a poet, she knew how difficult getting that first collection published is, and it was important to her to offer another pathway. Not long before she retired, she got a lot of conversations started with friends, colleagues, and the fine folks at MSU Press to see what that would take. She rallied friends for support, and they came through in an unbelievable fashion. Well, unbelievable if you don't know Anita. Since we launched Wheelbarrow Books, we've published 7 first volumes of poetry and 6 titles by previously published poets. And that was started, I didn't even note that started in 2016. 16, thank you. So Anita Skeen is a professor emerita in the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities at MSU here, where she also founded the Center for Poetry. She began her teaching career at Bowling Green State University, receiving an MA in English Lit in 1970 and an MFA in Creative Writing in 1971. She later taught in the MFA program at Wichita State University, where she received the Regents Award for Excellence in Teaching. In 1987, as a member of the Board of Directors of the Kansas Humanities Council, she helped create Talking About Literature in Kansas Libraries, a reading and discussion program that continues today. She joined the MSU Department of English in 1990. In 1997, she began serving as the director of the Residential Option Arts and Letters program, also known as Royal, a living and learning program for selected freshmen and sophomores in the College of Arts and Letters. Royal increased her interest in and commitment to undergraduate education and to building links between Royal students and other units on campus as well with the East Lansing community. Anita also taught in the MSU study abroad programs in England and in Ireland. She pitched the idea of a poetry center to RCAH founding Dean Steve Esquith as the college was forming in 2005 and 2006. And fortunately for us, he said something to the effect of, why not? So here we are. She's also been the director of the Creative Arts program at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico for over 3 decades and sits on the board of Friends of Theater Rutke in Saginaw, Michigan. She's the author of 6 volumes of poetry, and the first, let's get it together, shall we? She's the author of 6 volumes of poetry, each hand a map, portraits, Outside the Fold, Outside the Frame, The Resurrection of the Animals, Never the Whole Story, When We Say Shelter, with Oklahoma poet Jane Taylor, and The Unauthorized Audubon, a collection of poems about imaginary birds accompanied by linocots by anthropologist and visual artist Laura B. DeLinde. With Jane Taylor, she co-edited the literary anthology Once Upon a Place, Writings from Ghost Ranch. Her poetry, short fiction, and essays have appeared in numerous literary magazines and anthologies. While living in Kansas, she contributed to the book review section of the Wichita Eagle Beacon, and from 2002 until 2004 wrote a column that focused on writing and the life of the writing community in Michigan for Lansing's alternative newspaper, the Lansing City Pulse. And coming in June, make a note, get ready for Even the Least of These, a new collaboration between Anita and Laura DeLinde. Friends, it's a pleasure and an honor to welcome Anita Skeen.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. And I'm just really pleased tonight to be here to welcome 2 wonderful poets. I'm going to introduce Daniel, who will read first, and then Laurie is going to come back and talk a little bit about Gabby. But I want to say it's hard to express how absolutely delighted I am to be here tonight with Daniel Lassell and Gabrielle Calvocoressi. Daniel was the winner of the 8th Wheelbarrow Books. Try saying that fast. Wheelbarrow Books poetry competition for his manuscript, Spit. And Gabby was the judge, who was smart enough, insightful enough, and courageous enough to choose Spit over more than 70 other manuscripts. One of the things I love about being the series editor for Wheelbarrow Books is the number of writers I've been introduced to who have become friends, and the number of judges whose work I already knew about and treasured, but whom I have gotten to know in a much more personal way. I think I have the best unpaid job in the world, and tonight you will see why. Spit, and who wouldn't take a book down from the shelf with that title to see what's inside, is part family story, part farm story, part coming-of-age story. It's a story mixing humor and violence, interior and exterior landscapes, faith and despair. Life is hard and often ends in loss, but there is no sentimentality here, just the cold eye of observation and the softer edges of memory. There is healing, ultimately a blessing. One might ask, why in the world of national havoc, wars in Israel and Gaza, the Ukraine, the murder of political dissidents, termination of women's reproductive freedom, and support for insurrectionists, why do we need a book of poems about llamas? This is no llama red pajamas, no bedtime story for children. We need poems about llamas because they are peculiar to one man's experience. We need poems about llamas because they are important to the world and so much depends upon them. We read his poems to understand how ordinary people like ourselves deal with ordinary emotions like joy and love, grief and loss. From the pen of a skilled poet, we can learn just as much by encountering a llama as we can by a riot on the streets. It's a matter of perspective, what the poet and the reader bring to the page. It's a matter of tenacity on the part of the poet, a matter of recognition on the part of the reader. In Daniel's new chapbook, The Emptying Earth, which I was lucky enough to get a copy of when I was at the AWP conference in Kansas City last month, he continues to take a hard and unflinching look at the culture and crises of our time. In spare, small poems, he brings us into the lives of animal, people, and places. His poem, Vigil 4, begins, "Come, let us gather candles, light them. Let us pray for the lost, for what can't be, but with hope for what maybe, please, could be." And concludes with, "We grieve for that which ever erodes, which is why time leaps beyond clockwork, weeps as any soil gone by every inch, goodbyes where we have only ourselves under candlelight." Reading Daniel's poems, I recalled the words of U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon when she spoke about what she hoped readers would take away from her work. "I hope my poems can offer some breath, a softening of the mind's tight grip." Daniel Lassell's poems do just that. Please welcome Daniel Lassell.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, the Center for Poetry, Wheelbarrow Books, Michigan State University Press, and Michigan State University for having me. All right, let's enter the world of llamas. How to pet a llama. Let him sniff you first. Breathe easy. Look him in the eyes as you would your mother. Don't pat the head. He doesn't take being treated like a dog. Keep your hand at the neck, your palm down, as if smoothing out wrinkled linen. Let your words slowly out like twine, like pulling colors from a sleeve, like a sharing of troubled history. Llamas carry conversations as if seated in a rowboat before fog has lifted, as if pausing to hear the long echo after a good shout. Welcome him. Tenderly, a llama hums, not as if recalling the tune to a song, but something longer lost. Call it a lullaby if you like. Stand, just the two of you. Let your breath mingle as in cold, the air on tiptoe. This next poem has one of those titles that just sort of run right into the poem. Mom woke to a coyote staring in her window, and now I hear the pack wayward, yipping along the fences, the llama's pastures. I hurl myself with my siblings down a long string of gravel into darkness, without a weapon, only our yelling. We tumble our arms into air, scoop sticks, hammer an empty oil drum, every action hawkish, frantic to prevent dimpled limbs, flustered wool, bellies hooked open like grain bags. Meanwhile, in the fields, the llamas shape themselves a circle, siloing their young. The clamoring flinches, then recedes, the shadows of knee-high shoulders turning the hills into blurred absence, a silence climbed into substance. Tonight, each living creature becomes an almanac in mud, having pressed their pads into the earth and the earth having embraced them. Wheatgrass empties in wind, stems leaning and rising, a rhythm of lungs. Does everything wail like a body? Somewhere, the coyotes untangle their teeth from tendons, warming themselves with the displaced light of others. Taking in the stray. The day I found you in the barn, wandered from home or orphaned, you had so many ticks you lost your sight from blood loss. As you regained your eyes, I helped you find your way about the house. This place my family welcomed you and you could call your own. And you certainly did. The way you sprawled on couches, the way you consumed rabbits and breezed inside to vomit them on carpet, the way you ate field mice with their tails writhing, noodles through your teeth, and the time you brought home a deer limb, crossing the cattle guard to tear its flesh in front of the llamas as they looked around to see if one of them had misplaced a leg. You devoured so many sinless creatures, and yet I still remember the time you curled beside a fawn to guard it from coyotes after you had eaten its mother. Okay. So the book has like different rises and falls within it. So we're up and then we'll go down, and then we'll go up again, and then we'll go down, and then we'll go up again. So just letting you know. Lime. Every ending begins with a field. Mom stems her fingers with cigarettes, says the smoke clears a pathway for her lungs. Breathing has become a sport for her. 8 years, she says, and wipes her face, adjusts her tubing to undo a kink. How a tick has pierced my family. With that bright red ring set flames around our farmhouse. Blood, a whisper of bruises. My family for years thought doing began with seeing a culprit, those tiny eyes. And finally, when the doctors did name the cause, I rejoiced oddly, as if towering wheatgrass had somehow parted a doorway from the suffering temple. No, just another wall, and outside the tide creeps near. In the hospital again, Mom speaks in an altered voice, an accent not her own. Must be the brain, must be a feasting. We must keep her, the doctors say, learning again how to perform the most eloquent of drugs. Waves moving, claiming. Again the coats, no food, screening, then looking at screens. See the infection, see it. It sloshes away, a ravenous puddle expanding, taking with it sand, grain, flesh, an ocean, quickly then, another ocean. Oh, what ladder down is the body, this time respiratory failure. Not the oxygen tank, Mom says, that's how they hook you. Her blankets smell of smoke. Beyond her window, there's a fire unattended. It doesn't end, this disease. When the meds reach their location, cells fester and spill through organs. Another round. Mom gets dizzy from the leaving, the tick that's become her. Does a blood-yoked animal ever sicken, tuned to a pulsing, and wonder if in blood it's not blood, but where the blood goes? Forlorn, the wicked oars become anchors. The collection is largely as a narrative arc based upon like growing up on a farm and then eventually losing that farm through sort of watching the parents divorce. So this is sort of one of those poems within that narrative arc. Silent treatment. Something has failed, too easily severed, thin as onion skin. I can't say what, though I've seen my mother's head, something inside it heaving her teeth down. While my siblings and I fork sticks through the woods, she drifts between rooms, dusting furniture, the decorative artifacts of our lives. She teases insects from windowsills, piles trash bags on the doorstep. Feathers of dog hair lilt between grass stalks, and maybe a gust will free them. When the dinner bell sounds, Dad pauses in the barnyard, the rakes and buckets squared into their places. I should mention a content warning, probably for all of my poetry. There's a lot of violence. This one deals with suicide, so just for those. At the storm cellar. When something exists, there exists an option. A town away, a man ended his religion with a gunshot. The crows will no longer visit that yard. Like the crows, I wish to visit some landless landscape, perhaps to compare, to try out a different worship. I have aged enough to get away. Although I will miss even this storm cellar, where during Prohibition the former owner took payment every other month to store the bootleggers' bottles, where liquor waited quietly through winter, the times in which so many found rebellion in malt grain. It's never smelled of whiskey, though, despite the broken glass. Perhaps the stones years ago embraced the smell. The earth returned to earth, perhaps, same as me, as I played hide-and-seek with my siblings. Another hour. Maybe everything will return to its comfortable fashion, this farm and its histories, my family too, as we pass into separation. I've become perched in memory, a bootlegger and farmer, giving and given a choice between what's present and missing. While at this doorway and looking into the mildew darkness, a car idles in gravel, its headlights touching an empty field. So at this point, the speaker has moved away from the farm. Tussle. An irony that a city too wishes to be among a farm, and the highway sides nudge openly with weeds. How flower boxes tend doorways and sills, how gardeners shape bushes into absent animals. Is a fountain mimicry? Is landscaping devotion? A practice at religion? The awnings of branches fill up with new air. People feast upon mulch. And what are landmarks without passage? What are holes and gutters, if not light upon wounds? It all drifts into puddles, gently arranged rocks, to decorate a void, to accompany a life, a without and so. A farm equals a city a farm. One spiraling blur, one wilderness, and against and with, a window, and what beyond it? Portrait of truth as a satisfied belly. Maybe this is the way of it, an appearing without coaxing, a nest that sprouts from an open mailbox. To crack an egg means to will an inside out, to unwind a shell as feathers do. A feather warms rather than be warmed, An egg is an early feather, a pause for what path. An animal from dark has rummaged into the box, eaten the eggs. Beads of yolk dapple the soil. Evolution chart. I shake my hands over a sink like my great aunts did, two women who lived together among perch tobacco, sliced halves of fruit, jaundiced tabloids, sharing with me handfuls of candy, blue and red chocolate beads while plucking out their favorites, the green ones, and holding them up between their thumbs and index fingers, dimes just high enough so that the light of porch windows offered the cocoa shells a good melting. Their house had been a schoolhouse a century ago, its bell still there, the yard a yard for play, then a backyard, one land, how things do linger. When I was a child on my father's shoulders, I'd touch my hands to a ceiling and call it my second floor. To travel your childhood means never to age. Watch. I am attempting as far back as time will take me. Already, I am somewhere else. I hold my hands to a towel, cover them, the surface like fur, and I think maybe this feeling recalls some earlier animal. The way home. I look into an amber-necked bottle and remember the route as a calligraphy of tree branches, the winter's bone-filling wet. From our family van, I would see the power company's bulbous walls, a lineage of wires, the elderly draft horse, his head lowered over grass clumps, so many abandoned threshers and round bales wrapped too tight like plaster. Homesickness can howl a kind of guilt, as I am guilty to think a place my own. Every land begets and receives a trauma. Dynamite-blasted highways, flint shards and creek beds, smoke where animals flee upon burning paws. I take sips to open my mouth, but my ears. Okay. At this point in the collection, the divorce has sort of led to losing the farm. At this point, the llamas have been shipped off to another home, and so it's just Mom and my younger brother left. Nothing is clean in the country. After my family sold the farm, Mom wouldn't leave, delayed the trucks, had to take the kitchen cabinets too. They're going to make our home a hunting lodge, she said. They're going to blow apart those poor forest animals. The rich couple couldn't afford patience. They knew the governor, an easy phone call. When they evicted Mom, it was a locked door, a handwritten note. She left at dark without boxes. The next day, they called back the police, said from cameras they could tell my youngest brother was still there. Come quick. But a groundskeeper raised open his dusty palms. He'd been fixing light bulbs, tossing furniture into dumpsters, converting one ownership into another. What does it mean to settle from 100 acres into one? In a flower pot suburb, my youngest brother walks a stretch of asphalt daily, no stick in hand, no trees around him. The neighbors have decided fences take from space a kind of power, but the rabbits don't care. They enter onto lawns thinking, oh, what a feast. I'm going to read one more poem from Spit, and then I'll read one poem from my new chapbook. The light and where it lives. Disheveled seeds upon soil, wriggling, survived. Anything lost is anything to gain in emptiness. I wish enough to have only these memories I have. Yes, this too is a prayer, an opening poem. I never was any good at farming, always wanting for the city, the luxury of a shorter walk. I would see a speckled beetle hobbling in grass and be reminded of solitude. Now that I live in a city, something about community tends a community in me. Because the farmer's market on Market is only what it is and what I carry. Because on 54th, a meal fits upon a table simply as a menu. Because this city has become an embrace I prefer, and yes, what could grow does. This heft of sweetness, this quiet bag of grain that widens with new harvest. Praise be the forums of communion, found anywhere if sought. Before, I had only wanted for another day, all while not seeing every person, the privilege I had, not waking during night to car lights, sirens, hunger. I've climbed from being of dirt, rough fingernails, and I still don't know the purpose of dirt. When I drive the long route between this city, that city, I notice the weeds with newer eyes, how they lift beyond fence wire. This is my last poem. I want to thank you all again for coming out to hear me read. The Center for Poetry, thank you. Wheelbarrow Books, thank you for giving this book a home. And Gabrielle Calvocoressi, of all people, thank you for selecting it and bringing it into this world. To you, I want to dedicate this last poem. Applause. Because fingertips sound of loosening bones, these palms curve away from earth and encounter a wordless signal to describe a hunt or to praise some ancient fire. And the mind remembers the past and the sound of absence. No banging, no clicking, no vowels, just nerve endings to each other, whispers of what happened. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Daniel. It was. You're a little taller than I. No, not at all. I know how to work these things. Really nice hearing your voice and delivering your poems. Really nice. Thank you. So, my introductions aren't nearly as eloquent as my mentor, I'm afraid. But here we are. Going to start with that provided, and I'll add a little something after that. Gabrielle Calvocoressi is the author of The Last Time I Saw Amelia Earhart, Apocalyptic Swing, a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize, and Rocket Fantastic, winner of the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry. Calvocoressi is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including a Stegner Fellowship and Jones Lectureship from Stanford University, a Rona Jaffe Women Writers Award, a Lannan Foundation residency in Marfa, Texas, the Bernard F. Connors Prize from the Paris Review, and a residency from the Civitella di Ranieri Foundation, among others. Calvocoressi's poems have been published or are forthcoming in numerous magazines and journals, including The Baffler, The New York Times, Poetry, Boston Review, Kenyon Review, Tin House, and The New Yorker. Calvocoressi is an editor-at-large at the LA Review of Books and poetry editor at Southern Cultures. Works in progress include a nonfiction book entitled The Year I Didn't Kill Myself and a novel, the alderman of the graveyard. Calvocoressi was the Beatrice Shepard Blaine Fellow at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute for 2022 to 2023. Calvocoressi teaches at UNC Chapel Hill and lives in Old East Durham, North Carolina, where joy, compassion, and social justice are at the center of their personal and poetic practice. When Gabby was here in 2019, they gave a workshop in which they nudged participants to write about the beautiful terrible. This is their forte, in my humble opinion, a gift for telling the challenging stories, illustrating the scenes, and placing the reader there at a safe distance, whether telling the tales of circus fire victims, as they did in their debut the last time I saw Amelia Earhart, or of their own journey. The angles at which they come at the story seem always to illuminate the beauty that is often so hard to see in the terrible. Friends, I'd like you to give a hearty welcome to Gabrielle Calvocoressi.
It was bound to happen. What a total pleasure to be here. I was saying to Laurie, you know, there's like before, I mean, there's no such thing, right? There may never be something as after the pandemic, but there's sort of before everything shut down and after. And, you know, this was one of the places I came right before everything shut down, right? And so it's only been a few years since I've been here, but the world is also, it just is totally different. And so it's a real honor and a privilege to get to be back here and to get to be with all of you again. And I say that to the people who are in the room, and I always say this, but after the pandemic, although I'm also someone who came up during, a kind of guts of the AIDS epidemic, so I also say it to all the ghosts in the room. I say it to all the people we've lost who maybe are here for a poetry reading tonight. All the spirits, all our families, all everything, assembling together. I want to thank Anita, and I want to thank Laurie for just being such friends to me and such friends to poetry, right? Wheelbarrow Books, also the Center for Poetry here. I think it's also okay to say it's very rare that I come to a space that is welcoming to everyone and is also a profoundly queer space in my mind, is a space just that has been doing a certain kind of activism for a long time, just in terms of the way community is shown to be possible. And so that's something that means a lot to me as a poet and as a person, and just to everyone who's made me so welcome, all the students, everyone from the minute I got here. And to get to be here, I mean, I'm here to celebrate Daniel Lassell, right? All the ghosts want to celebrate you too, Daniel. Do you feel them? It's full of them. Judging is a funny word, right? It's funny to say like, oh, I'm a judge. And judging it's a funny idea, like saying one thing is better than another, that kind of economy, right? To some extent, as a queer person, I sort of bristle. I think like, oh, I don't know. And yet what I got to do with that Wheelbarrow Books prize is I got to look at all these remarkable manuscripts, and I got to say, this is the one that speaks to me so deeply, that I think will also speak to readers so deeply, and I think it's a book we need right now, right? And it was at such a profoundly challenging time in the world that this book came into being. A book that teaches us about compassion, about what it means to be there, for people, and also the moments we can't be, that when we are incapable of certain kinds of presence, right? And what it means to make poems and to write poems. And so I just feel very blessed to be here with you, Daniel. When I got the email not long ago saying, wait, is this my water? Yeah. Saying, would I come? And my wonderful friend Vaughn said, I don't know, Gabby, like there's a lot going on for you. And I said, I would not miss Wheelbarrow Books and Daniel Lassell for anything. I hope you feel really loved and held tonight, because you really are. You make me want to live. Hammond B3 organ cistern. The days I don't want to kill myself are extraordinary. Deep bass. All the people in the streets waiting for their high fives and leaping. I mean leaping when they see me. I am the sun-filled god of love, or at least an optimistic undersecretary. There should be a word for it. The days you wake up and do not want to slit your throat. Money in the bank, enough for an iced green tea every weekday and Saturday and Sunday. It's like being in the armpit of a Hammond B3 organ, just reeks of gratitude and funk, the funk of ages. I am not going to ruin my love's life today. It's like the time I said yes to gray sneakers, but then the salesman said, wait. And there, out of the back room, like the bakery's first biscuits, bright blue kicks. Iridescent, like a scarab. Oh, who am I kidding? It was nothing like a scarab. It was like bright blue fucking sneakers. I did not want to die that day. Oh my God. Why don't we talk about it? How good it feels. And if you don't know, then you're lucky, but also, you poor thing. Bring the band out on the stoop. Let the whole neighborhood hear. Come on, everybody. Say it with me nice and slow. No pills. No cliff, no brains on the floor. Bring the bass back. No rope, no hose. Not today, Satan. Every day I wake up with my good fortune and news of my demise. You know what, I just got so moved by that for a minute. Not for my own rhyme, but just like where we are. Sorry. Every day I wake up with my good fortune and news of my demise. Don't keep it from me. Why don't we have a name for it? Bring the bass back. Bring the band out on the stoop. Hallelujah. I'm trying to I want to talk about ghosts for a second because I'm trying to keep time. What I'm always worried about is that my father, who loves to text, is going to be texting the whole time and I'm going to get... But actually what happened is just as I was reading that poem, my editor, Gabe Fried, texted and said, Lucy died 6 years ago today. So this is also the anniversary of the death of Lucy Brock-Broido, my great teacher. So I think the ghosts are here. Danielle, thanks for bringing the ghosts. We lost so many people. Lucy died not so long ago, Lucy Brock-Broido, before the pandemic. And, but also somehow during COVID, we lost so many people. I at least, did other people have this experience? I lost so many people, but not to COVID. But so many people died during that time in my life. And at that point, it was like, people can die of things other than COVID? I thought that was, what? I thought everyone was just, what? I didn't know I had to watch out for that. And I started writing these miss you poems. I just thought, what if we could open a portal? What if I could not even bring someone back? Would I bring Lucy back from the dead? I don't know. She probably likes the other world. It's probably pretty fabulous for her. But I would open the portal so I could just stand there with her again. Just smell her perfume. And I wanted to do that with my grandmother. I wanted to do that. So, and also a lot of people started writing those miss you poems, on Twitter and stuff, all sorts of people. I said, why not write a miss you poem and open the portal? And I still get them. People will say, my dad died. I thought I'd open the portal. The idea is the more of us who can write these poems, maybe we just can all shimmer together for a while. So If you want to write a miss you poem, miss you, miss you, miss you, miss you, would like to take a walk with you. Do not care if you just arrive in your skeleton, would love to take a walk with you. Miss you. Would love to make you shrimp saganaki like you used to make me when you were alive. Love to feed you. Sit over steaming bowls of pilaf, little roasted tomatoes covered in pepper and nutmeg. Miss you. Would love to walk to the post office with you. Bring the ghost dog. We'll walk past the waterfall, and you can tell me about the after. Wish you would come back for a while. Don't even need to bring your skin sack. I'll know you. I know you'll know me, even though I'm bigger now. Grayer. I'll show you my garden. I'd like to hop in the leaf pile you raked, but if you want to jump in, I'll rake it for you. Miss you. Standing, looking out at the river with your rake in your hand. Miss you in your puffy blue jacket. They're hip now. I can bring you a new one if you'll only come by. No, I told you it was okay to go. No, I told you it was okay to leave me. Why'd you believe me? You always believed me. Wish you could come back so we could talk about truth. Miss you. Wish you would walk through my door, stare out from the mirror, come through the pipes. So many vessels and bodies. The sun got all over everything. We're about a week out from the anniversary of my mother taking her life, many years ago, 1988, but also yesterday, also right now as I'm reading to you. She never stops. The sun got all over everything. Over the boys and girls by the pool, over the bougainvillea, which got so hot my palms stayed warm for minutes after. It made a mess of a day that was supposed to be the worst and lured me outside, so I forgot her death entirely. And also the polar bears scrambling on the ice chips. And also that there was no water in the Golden State. The pool was full and the sun poured across the women's bodies, so you had to shade your eyes. Or I did. I had to put my hand up to see what they were saying. I know it's no excuse, and I had made a plan to cry all day and into the evening. I marked it in my book, which seems like something I'd make up in a poem, except this time I actually did it. I wrote, grieve, because we're all so busy, aren't we? And so broke. I needed to make an appointment with my anguish so I could take my mind off buying groceries that I really couldn't afford. Anyway, I didn't mean to go outside, except there the sky was, just ridiculously blue, taunting me with a pigment that I felt the need to name. And from somewhere close by, a voice I couldn't see because the sun was like a yolk cracked over it said, "What are you drinking?" And I said, "I'm grieving. I'm very busy remembering. I made an appointment because last year I forgot and then felt awful." The sun opened its mouth and made a gong of the canyons. It poured across the girls and slicked across their Dior lenses. I put my tongue on it, exactly when I should have been tearing at my clothes and lighting candles. I got on top and let it find the tightness in my back and open where my wings would be. Somewhere my mother was dying and someone was skinning a giraffe. And I let it go. I just let it go. I've been writing, we're in Lent right now. Woohoo, 3 cheers for Lent. last year, for Lent, I thought, I'm going to give up chocolate because that will be really hard for me. And then instead I thought, nope, I'm going to give up self-loathing for these days. And the way I'm going to, very hard for me, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to write a poem every single day of Lent. Because one of the things I realize is sometimes I don't write just because I kind of hate myself a little bit, and I can't imagine I have anything to say. It was a remarkable practice. I recommend it. I also got to keep eating chocolate. One of the things that began to manifest was that I spent so much of my young life both imagining the body of Christ on the cross, being told to imagine the suffering of that body in such exquisite detail, and then also having the ways in which my body could be forced to suffer described to me in tremendous detail. I think now a lot about what does that mean, what did that, But when I was young, I don't know, I just imagined another body that was also scared. Lent Cistern, Day 13, Hawk Song Cistern. I think about him on the cross. I did when I was little too, but then not until this moment when Hawk Song outside my winter window. Heard it in passing, loud, right in the middle of the pain, then fading off past the steeple of the first church. I'm not sure why it made me think of him. Who I believe was him, though no more of God than all of us. Too much pain, probably, to have heard a hawk song, too much fear in calling out. Somehow when the bird flew past, I wondered, was it sunny like today is, so bright, and me with a little cold? Which has my mind wandering. It smells like winter, but outside, spring's blanket drapes all over me. How far could I reach my arms out? How much could I bear? And would I hear the hawk that flew past me? That poor young man. Body over body over body over body. What kind of body am I? That might be my life's whole question. Shave. Like the buck I am, I turn my head side to side. I hear the leaves rustle. I shake my head a little, and birds reel round the forest. I am no branch. My head turns to the side. I see out my side eye. The deep pool of the eye sees itself pool in the mirror. I oil myself till I am all a lather. My chest heaves out so my full heart can abandon the ribs' stockade. Where the bullet would go if the hunter were a good shot, that's where I place the razor. I make my skin taut. I pull my own neck back and to the side. I come for myself. Yes, I was a lady once, but now I take the blade and move it slowly past the jugular, up the ridge of my chin where the short hairs glisten. I was once ashamed. It was a thing I did in private, my own self, my quarry, no more. Look how the doe comes round, and also the doves, and also the wolf who lets me pass. The fox offers me the squirrel's hide to buff myself to shining. There is no such thing except the smoothness of my face. Praise House, the new economy. This is after and for my dear friend Ross Gay. The rosemary bush blooming its unabashed blue. Also dumplings filled with steam and soup so my mouth fills and I bubble over with laughter. Little things. People kissing on bicycles, being able to walk up the stairs and run back down. Joanna's garden after the long flight, not being detained like everyone thought I would. The man with dreadlocks and a perfect green shirt walking home from work. One cold beer before I drink it and get sick. How peaches mold into compost in a single day, orange to gray to darkness into dirt. Her ankles taste. The skin right under the knob, delicate as a tomatillo's shroud. All the animals that talk to me, that I finally let them talk to me. The blessing of waking early enough to watch the fox bathe itself, the suction of a man's hands meeting another's on the street, every single person looking up to see them. Bros, yes, but lovely in the golden light, with brims swung to the back. I want shoulders like they have. Want my waist to taper to an ass built like the Davids. I admit it. This body's not enough for me. Still, I love it. I'll be sure, blasting out a Nissan Sentra's windows, bow ties, ridiculous blues, my mother's seizures, specifically that I don't have them. That I can answer Ross's call or not, because we live harmonious and are always talking somehow. Tapestries with their gluttony of deer, fig perfume, and also cypress, boxer briefs, and packing socks and jockey shorts, strap-ons, soft and hard, welcome in her hand and in mine as I greet the real me. The little shop in Provincetown and the speckled dog that licks itself in that fresco of the crucifixion, Mary Oliver. I love her. I really do. The baseball she gave me that says, "Go Sox," though I love the Orioles. Old Bay on all my shrimp and justice, and cities burning if people need to burn them to get free. My grandmother gardening in the late light, Sun Ra, the first time Paris, even though I've never been there, Niddle plums, tattoos, everlasting clouds, Orion's belt pushing inside her with both hands holding myself up, my weight, her grabbing and saying, God, fuck the neighbors, Casablanca, not knowing anything, angels, mashed potatoes, good red wine. It's interesting, if you know that poem, what does it mean to divest even within your own poem from something? I will say that I am reading tonight and I just keep thinking, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. I really do. And just one thing poems can do, and we see this with so many Palestinian poets, we see it with this I know this Center for Poetry, there's all sorts of stuff that people do with June Jordan's work here, thinking about this. I mean, it's hard right now to believe another world is possible, but another world is possible, and one of the things that poetry can do is it can just be shoved into the jaws of the war machine, which is so hungry all the time, and God, I feel so grateful that poems can do that. Sometimes we forget that poems can do it. Did you hear the news out of Tennessee, out of North Carolina, out of... I know, you know, I know you know, but also I don't think you do. I want to explain it more clearly because you say you live in a bubble. You think that means you live in a bubble of peace. There is no peace in my heart, no march, no brunch, no party up in the club of my 4 chambers. There's an amp that's nothing but feedback. It makes it so I can barely write or dream or lose this weight I mean to lose because my blood pressure's out of control. Did you hear what's up in? They stripped away the bird song. They took the owl out of my tree. They took my oak tree too. They took my canopy and all the brightness I can muster, and Wayne Shorter up and died. I mean, everybody's sick of this earth. Good Friday. All your friends assemble. The cats curled on laps as you sit at the table. All the dogs get all the prime rib they want. No scraps for anyone because there are no scraps, just heaping portions, and everyone's had their fill. All the clocks stop. The lights strung over the feast are actually stars. Everyone's made it through our Saturn returns, like champions. Pour the nectar into the goblets. Lift your hand for the toast. Put your shoulder into it. In the distance, you see the trees, and past, you see the hilltop. No one else is looking. They're wiping saganaki off each other's chins. They're kissing baklava from a stranger's lips. Honey never tasted so good. A little buckwheat in it, a little borage. The poison ivy the bee found on its way home. In your ears, the buzzing as you look into the distance. Head like a hive, look away. Feel your friends' hands on your shoulders, sleepy drunk. They're leaning on you, saying something about some other night you all had together. Someone took a goat and cooked it in the ground. From somewhere, a guitar. Girls laughing or boys laughing. Why did you ever care who was who? The point is, they're laughing. In the distance, the hilltop almost looks lit from behind, but it's not close to morning. It couldn't be. All your friends assembled at the table you built with your dad. How he held his hand over yours as you tapped the hammer. He smelled like cedar, his beard tickling your cheek. Why feel so alone when someone's just offered you figs, some cheese, has placed their hand on the back of your neck, has turned your chin away from the view in the distance? Be here right now, they say, leaning to kiss you on the mouth. Thanks so much. Thank you. Now what happens?
Now what happens is I'd like to ask Anita and Daniel and Gabby to stick around and choose a seat. And we could maybe bring up a house light. Oh, look at there.
It's so wild to get to hear someone read for the first time. You're like, oh my God.
I know, you hear his voice in your head for days when you're reading these manuscripts, and then you get to hear his voice.
Yes. So I kind of thought it'd be really interesting for folks here to hear how this particular process worked in choosing Daniel's book to be published, his manuscript to be published, but also, how is it getting a first book published? It's changed clearly over the years, and kind of take it for there. Have a little chat about that, and as questions arise, we'll ask some questions too. This is me being really smooth, so I'm gonna hand this to Anita. And I think I can
Excuse Excuse me.
this other one.
Get water right there.
Should there be questions?
That's it. I came back from AWP with COVID, and it's gone now. But the first time I had COVID, my cough went on for a very long time, and I can see that thank you, is probably the same thing again. I'm not going to say very much. I'm going to let the author and the judge say most of it, but I do want to say I wasn't joking in my introduction when I said this is just about the best job in the world. To have all these manuscripts come, I wish they came a little slower, but to have them all come across our desks in the fall, we've been getting about 80 now, reading through them with a wonderful team of, I think this time we had about 8 or 9 people who read with us. We fill out evaluation sheets. We have meetings every couple weeks and we talk about the manuscripts we've read. Some we can rule out, some we give scores to. We keep reading, we come to the end, and then we select the ones that we send to the final judge, and that's always very hard. Reading the manuscripts from the emerging poets and reading the manuscripts from the established poets is quite different. And I always feel like I want to publish all of the emerging ones because I want to give everybody a first book. But we select the ones, we send them off to the judge, and then we wait to see what the judge has got to say. But you get very attached to these manuscripts. I'm not kidding. You don't know whose manuscript you're reading. You don't know where they live. You don't know what they do in their real life, but you know them. You feel like you know them. And then when it comes time to write the winner, that's absolutely wonderful, and that's one of my favorite things to do. But you also have to write the non-winners, which is not so much fun. But I try to take the comments that have been written on the evaluation sheets, the ones that I feel will be helpful, and send those to the finalists. I don't write to everybody, but I write to all the finalists and let them know what people said about their manuscripts. And they write me back, and they say, thank you. Editors don't do this, but we do this. And I will say that we have one person who's been a finalist 3 times and just can't quite get over that hump. And one of our finalists took the comments back, 2 years later resubmitted and won, Marion Boyer, who was here last year with Ice Hours. And to be a part of this, I taught for 55 years in college before I retired. And I thought I would not teach that long, but when I was here in ARCA and I had a wonderful dean and wonderful colleagues and wonderful students and a wonderful community, why would I quit? Paper grading. That's why we quit. Committee meetings. That's why we quit. But anyway, I love doing this work, and I love meeting new poets on the page and then getting to see them in the flesh and getting to talk to the judge about why we selected the manuscripts. And so that's my sort of introduction, and I'll let Daniel talk about being one of the winners.
All right. Composing Spit was a little bit different, I think, than, or the experience of having it accepted was different than, I think, what I see happening now in the poetry community. It took me 10 years to write Spit. The oldest poems that made it into the book, I think, were written in 2013. There's just 3 of them that I took from my MA program at Marshall. Everything else I wrote, after I heard about my parents getting divorced, and it took 6 years for that divorce to actually be completed and finalized. So that was a long time to live in sort of a state of turmoil and misery and, awkward holidays. When I sort of knew the ending to what the book was calling for, it came together rather quickly. I got a lot of feedback on it from people that I admired, and they all gave incredible feedback. When I actually started sending out the book, it was a finalist the first place I sent it. It was the Crab Orchard first book prize. And that was last year that I think it was last year they ran it because John Tribble passed away after that. And then that fall, that summer, I think the fourth place I might have sent it, it was also a finalist. And then it was finalist again that fall. And so I think I was pampered by sort of knowing that I was on to something with Spit, that I had something special. And why I think that's different from where most of the poetry community is today is that a lot of the entryway for first books is largely through contests. And it can be very hard, I think, for a lot of poets to feel that they can keep going if they're not getting validation along the way. Because the number of manuscripts have only grown and grown and grown for those pools, the chances of a book getting picked up are that much more slim. And I think just the process, there's not as many just books acquired through open reading periods anymore, because there has been a proliferation of book contests. And some can say that's good, some can say that's bad, but I think it has made it harder for a first book to find its home. And so when I got the call that Spit had been picked up, I was just over the moon. I was shocked. I just couldn't believe it. And I'm so happy that it found a home here. And I'm grateful every day for it being out in the world and finding its home. But because it found a home within like 9 months of actually setting it out, I realize now that is a very, different experience than I think what most poets are experiencing today. There are far more talented poets than I out there who have been sending their book out for years and years and years, and they still have not found a home. And so, I feel like it's important to sort of say that trust your art and just keep going, and don't let the fact that it's not a finalist or it didn't get good feedback or something along those lines deter you from putting your art out into the world, because the pool of entries is so large these days, and your voice deserves to be heard. Your art deserves to have its place. So just persist and don't give up on your art. I'll just say that.
One of the luckiest things, I feel this is a lucky night being here with you. I have been in this world. I'm 49 years old. And I guess, I've been writing poems since I was a teenager, but I think of myself as sort of beginning to really work in the world of poetry when I was like 24, 25 years old. So I've been doing it a long time. And yes, like one of the benefits of writing for a long time is you have books, and you meet tons of people, and you have this whole world of making art. But at some point, the other thing you get to do is you get to you start to be asked to do things like judge contests or sit on fellowship boards, or it's complicated sometimes, right? With everything is tinged by capitalism and things like that, right? And one's hunger. And so you have to be a little bit careful, I think, that you don't do too much of that in a way and become, start controlling so much of the money in the world, as it were, so many of the resources. But I've I've worked hard to pick and choose where I do this kind of work. And when Anita said to me and Laurie said to me, would you be part of Wheelbarrow Books? I just was like so into it. Like I came here to read and I was going to give this reading, 2019, and then they were like, well, what about this? And just everything about Wheelbarrow Books I was into. You know, like I was just into the passion. It's a passion project, and but it's a rigorous, it's like this is the good work and the deep, rigorous work that you're doing. Like Anita and Laurie and everybody who's part of it. And you're right, like there also just aren't presses like this as much anymore. There aren't, like, you touch every part of this process, right? Like, that's not the case anymore with a lot of places. Maybe one person's handling the design of your book, and then a million miles away they're doing distribution. And all. So I was really excited to be part of this process. And then I got all the manuscripts. And one of the things I get to do in my life now that's so wonderful is I get to like to read the work of so many remarkable poets, younger or older, people have been doing it for a while. But I also get to like realize that there are certain things I'm not confident about, but I'm confident in my ear. And I'm confident when I hear something that like feels different and new to me and that matters. I was saying this to Daniel, because another book I think about is Tyree Day's book, River Hymns, which is a manuscript I was lucky enough to come across. It's not even about choosing, like it's about something just rises up. And I read the Wheelbarrow books, I read the finals, and there were many, many, many good manuscripts. But Daniel's just, like, the minute I heard it, it really was hearing it. The minute I heard it, something started to build in me. And I thought, this is really important. This is there's so many books of poems that are sort of like project books. I've been accused of writing project, and like there's nothing wrong with that. But it was so clear that what you were writing was, you were making a world. You were coming from a place of deep personal experience. Also but also one was watching the experience of what a great poet you are. And like, the various kinds of crafts that you've built through your life for all kinds of reasons, the patience, the attention. And so I was saying to Daniel, I heard it, I read it, and then I was like, okay, just keep going, keep reading, other manuscripts. But I just kept hearing it. And the thing that I think is really important is that I still keep hearing Daniel's books. There are poems, right? Poems. Like, there are books that I choose and I love them. And I think the thing that I hope when I'm choosing a book for something or poems for something is not, I'm going to hear it now, it's going to fill me up, and then I'm not going to remember. But that I'm going to keep hearing it. And I've just kept hearing you. And I think that, like, what I can also hear is just how your career, I don't know how the career is going to unfold, but I can feel it unfolding. I can feel this is a poet who's going to matter for a long time to a lot of people. And also I want to say, that this book came out at a time when the world was, we should talk about that too. Like, the world shutting down, what that means. I think we're very lucky that the book keeps building.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was released in July 2021, which we had a summer, or what started out as a summer, where we thought the pandemic was subsiding. And so there was some excitement and anticipation of what that summer might look like for a lot of people. And I thought, all right, we just went through hell. I'm glad that this book is coming out now then, when it seems like there's optimism. But then it wasn't so. The book was still read, and it's still, I was able to give a lot of Zoom readings, it also came at an unfortunate time when I moved to New York City on the week that the book was released as well. So I couldn't really do as much, I think, as I otherwise in a different time have been able to do for a book release. So I am really grateful and glad that the book has had a slow build for readers, and that it does sort of persist in the minds of a lot of readers. And I get people all the time telling me that they're returning to the book and rereading it, and that for a poet means a lot too. There's so many books that are only read once and then they're shelved and forgotten about. And that's not anything that I ever wanted for my art. I create with the intention that people will return to it and find something new about it, because that, for me, is the best form of art, the type that is multifaceted, that you could really glean a different understanding for each time you encounter it. Yeah.
Well, I've done a poor job at keeping track of our time, so
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'd like to ask anyone in the audience if you have questions for Gabby or Daniel or Anita. Hi, Ryan. Mike, the mic, or you want to yell it? All right, sure.
So it's actually for both of you. But when I was listening, I found myself being able to relate really easily to a lot of what you were saying, even though I haven't shared a lot of the same experiences as you both. And so I guess my question is, as you're writing or as you're judging, how do you think about the relatability of the poem to the audience? Are you writing purely being inspired by your own experiences in life, or are you taking into account other human experiences, and are you judging based on poems that relate to you the most, or are you thinking more in terms of poems that might relate to a lot of different people?
I think in some ways I'm initially so selfish, right? Like I'm thinking about me. Oh, I love this. If I'm understanding the question correctly, like I'm initially like, oh, this is my year, I'm into it. Although I do also think that, like, as I'm thinking about that, I am thinking, well, if I'm into it, other people are going to be into it. Not like, oh, I'm so great, right? But just, okay, like there's something here that's really speaking to me. But yeah, like I will say that at some point there often does become that feeling of like, this is going to matter to people. You know, I always say, like, in the last 4 manuscripts or the last 4 fellowship applications in a big group, it's very tight, you know? It's like, what? One of the things that is true with this book is I thought, like, I think this is a book people are going to need right now. I also felt like it was a book that, and this is what I love, like, there are certain books that are great books because, like, in other hands, they would have been the worst book in the world, right? Like, I really mean this, like, horrible. You know, it's like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a way in which the themes that Daniel is dealing with, a lot of poets try and do it, and, like, it just doesn't work out so much. It can become patronizing. It can be a kind of caricature. It can be, right? A lot of people want to write the kind of book Daniel wrote. And so I also think there was something where I was like, here is someone doing this really, really well. Here is someone writing about these themes and about this kind of world in a way that is really fresh and really new and it's going to teach people something too. In addition to just like opening their guts and their hearts and like exciting them, like this is a book that some young poet or young meaning we're all young poets, you know, we're all working on our craft. Someone's also going to look at this and think like, oh, this is going to teach me how to do the thing I want to do. And I think that does matter to me. I think that's something.
Thanks. I'll speak to my own experience of like how I thought about audience with Spit. And I think more broadly too about my own poetic craft. I think authenticity, being able to tell the story that Spit was calling for, and the speaker of the poems is not directly me, but sort of, I call it a fictionalized version of myself, and that provided a degree of separation for myself. It was a speaker I knew fully, and that I knew exactly how that speaker was feeling because they were so close to me, but it was not me necessarily. And that degree of separation allows for truth-telling. It allows for you to take and strip out some of the sentimentality and tell it cold. And if you tell it cold, and if there's enough heart behind it, the heartfelt will still bleed through. That DNA of the author is always ever present in work. So first, when I was writing these poems, I had to be authentic to myself. So I wrote them for myself. And then in the editing process, then I started to consider, well, who is the audience? With Spit, I wanted the audience to be someone who didn't necessarily read poetry, who could encounter this book and find meaning in it. And I just picked a person in my life that I knew who was sort of cynical, I think, what I would think is as cynical toward poetry, and tried to challenge myself with these poems. Can I convince this person who, was my neighbor at the farm? He was just a very, rough and tough farmer. He didn't necessarily hate poetry, but if he picked up a book of poems, I'm not sure he'd get much out of it. So he sort of became the first audience for Spit. And then in another round of edits, I began to think about, how do I broaden this then to a wider audience then? So in terms of audience, it's more so about yourself first, and then you think about, how do I match this to who I want this book to end up in whose hands? And if you're authentic to yourself at every stage of that poetic craft, then the urgency, the authenticity, all of the things that make a good and surprising poem and a book with surprise and momentum and tension, which are the three things I think that make a good book, all those are sort of fall into place. Yeah.
I want to say something about the authenticity thing, because when you read so many manuscripts, there are voices that come across almost instantly as not authentic, and not that they don't have something important to say, but they're trying too hard. And that trying too hard is very apparent when you get several poems into the manuscript. The ones that are authentic, you also, and this goes back to what Gabby was saying, you remember things from those manuscripts as you're reading. You remember lines. You may not, you don't know the author's name, and you may not be able to remember the title, but you'll say, the one about llamas, I remember that image of the dog protecting the fawn when it had killed its mother. Things like that stay with you. And so I think, you look for a lot of things in manuscripts. You look for craft. You look for relevance. You look for audience when you're reading. You're kind of thinking about all these things. And in some manuscripts, craft wins out, but maybe not content. And in others, the content you wish had the craft. But getting them together is pretty tough. And that's where I think part of the authenticity comes in. And I think this would be the last thing I would say. When I was becoming a poet and was in graduate school, I was taught write like the great writers. At that time, it was William Carlos Williams, it was Ezra Pound, it was Elizabeth Bishop, write like the great writers. So, of course, I tried to do that. And then I went on and became a faculty member. And then I read Adrienne Rich, who said, write what you know. which wasn't the same thing that these other guys knew at all. And I thought, okay, I know what I know. So I did that for a while, and then I read Audre Lorde, who said, write what only you can tell. And that, when I think about my progression as a writer and my progression in terms of authenticity, I had to start somewhere. So I started with the models, but they weren't me. And then I found out I could write about the things that were about me, but I had to wait to find out how only I could tell them. And that's the authenticity part, I think.
I think, given our time, I'm going to ask that further questions be asked up in the book signing and reception. We have a couple of snacks up there waiting for you, and I'd love to see you up there. It's on the second floor in the Lookout Gallery, and I appreciate your being here tonight, and I look forward to more conversation upstairs.
And thanks to Laurie.
Thanks to Laurie.
Carrying all of our anxiety with her.
Yeah.
So
great
thank
night.
you all. Yes.
Thank you so much.